Hi there and welcome to Sean Cameron Photographic. Now, the Nikon 200mm f2, originally released in 1977 and aimed directly for media photographers. Now this one is the latest, it's the VR2 version, and so it's an oldie. But I'll tell you what, it's a Goldie. 2010 it was released. So, what can I tell you about it? Well, the first thing I can tell you about it is, holy cow, this thing's heavy. It's actually 2,930 grams or 6 pounds 7 ounces, slightly more than my 300mm f2.8, which is 2,900 grams or 6 pounds 4 ounces. I think this feels heavier because it's kind of shorter by about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. But it's actually the same diameter. It's the same girth, if you like, which makes it a little bit stumpy. Unfortunately, it doesn't help that this foot here is kind of in the wrong place because the centre of gravity is back here, especially when the camera's on it. So this, they're saying that it's front heavy, but it's actually not. It's when you've got the camera on it, it's back here. I guess it's just about centre of gravity when the lens is on its own, but you wouldn't use it like that. The best thing to do, to be quite honest, is just move it out of the way completely, or put a plate on it like this one. Mind you, then you can't reach any of the buttons properly. Now it's got exactly the same switches as the 300mm. So starting from the top, why not? MA, it's got switch MA, which is a kind of manual focus override. Then it's got AM, which is a lesser reactive manual override. And then of course it's got manual focus, which is manual focus. Underneath that you have full or 6 meter to infinity switch, depending on how close you're going. I mean, what can I say? That's up to you, isn't it? I just always have it on full, I think. Anyway, VR, normal or active. Underneath that, you actually switch the VR on and off with this ring here. Here, it has a safety button just there somewhere to stop you accidentally switching it off or on. There's a switch, not that you would, I would have thought, because you're not really anywhere near it. Then you've got memory recall there. Now, I was reminded that in none of my videos have I really explained memory recall. Well, if this is switched on, you can focus in the normal way. Then you press the memory set button, which is around this side. And then you can focus on something else. And then if you press one of these buttons here, one of the 4 buttons going round, you actually, it automatically focuses to it. Mind you, so does back button focus and shutter button focus if you have that set up. Anyway, nonetheless, it will return to the same saved focus. Now, the amazing thing about it is this will continue to work even if you switch the camera off between shots. And even if you switch lenses and put this back on again, it'll still remember where that distance was, where that aim point was. Yeah, very interesting. Mind you, if you've got the feet the other way, it's almost impossible to reach any of the buttons. So yeah, spin it up, keep it out of the way. Right, AFL, carrying on, locks the focus while one of the front buttons is pressed, and AF on works like back button, so you switch that and then you press one of these and it either holds it or it focuses on refocuses. Anyway, finally the last switch is sound on and off. And unless you want to drive all the wildlife and everyone else mad, take my advice and keep it switched off. So, That is the 200 f2, and as usual I'm going to be comparing this with some other lenses, and I'm guessing that you've already guessed which one of them is. Yep, the 300. I'll tell you the others as I carry along because I want to get on with this video, quite frankly. So let's go to the first test. Flipping it, this is heavy. I've got to put it down. See you in a minute. Now, whenever I have a new camera or a lens to test, I nearly always go to the local lake. It's got pretty much everything: fast action, tricky lighting, contrast, and for this video, portraits. The first thing to note is that this lens wide open at f2 is extremely sharp. There's no drop off at all. And I'll tell you what, that's good, because the only aperture that I'm going to be using for this video is f2. It is, after all, its biggest feature. And that narrow depth of field is perfectly illustrated in this image. It isolates a single subject amongst a crowd beautifully. As the lens was designed for DSLRs, I tried it on my D5. Do you know, I'd forgotten how much I like the images produced by this camera. Now, the 200mm f2 attracts a lot of attention. In the couple of hours at the lake, 5 photographers walked past as I was using it, and all 5 asked about it. So if you want to keep a low profile, don't walk around with a Nikon 200 f2 lens. It's a real conversation magnet. Moving to the hide, I thought that I'd compare the way the 200 f2 deals with the background. Firstly against the 300mm at f2.8, and then with the Z70-200 zoomed to 200. And also set at f2.8. So what do you think? Is there a big difference? I've inadvertently chosen a slightly soft image for the 200mm, but as I always say, I choose them randomly so it doesn't always work the way I'd like it to. Now, I know it's difficult, but try and ignore the cute squirrel and concentrate on the background. I think that it's safe to say that the 200mm f2 gives the softest bokeh, but it kind of will, won't it? After all, it's f2. No surprise then that the 300mm f2.8 is next and the Z70-200 third. This is pure physics. The larger the lens magnification, the more separation between the subject and the background. However, it does underline why the 200mm f2 is so impressive, especially for portraits. So it doesn't really matter how it does it, but what it does. The lens that I usually use for outside portraits is, of course, the 300mm. I'm often saying it. But that's no good for indoors. So I also have the Nikon 85mm f1.4G. It was a bit of a legend in its own right, so it seems logical to bring it to the mix. So with the help of my little hairy model, I popped the Atomos Ninja on the camera and made sure that Sprite was in line with the distracting mess that I'd carefully arranged for the background. The first set of images were taken at an equal distance of about 12 foot between me and the dog in the background. As you can see through the Atomos, the focus point is absolutely glued to the dog's eye, even when I wave the camera around to prove the point. Apologies that I didn't give an advanced health warning for that. So, starting with the new lens, my 85mm at f1.4, which is beautifully sharp, and then bringing in the 200 at f2. Both lenses make the eyes pop in a good way, with a narrow depth of field. The Z70-200 is also sharp, but the question is, which image has the most distracting background? So is it worth getting an extra ultra fast lens as well as the very capable Z70-200? Well, actually, I think yes, both images are sharp, but the 200 really makes the subject stand out. It's just too hard for me to decide between the 85mm and the 200mm images. When I crop into the 85mm, it's sharp where it's supposed to be sharp. Actually, it's quite stunning. Cropping into the 200 this time, and it's equally impressive. So, I rest my case, it's hard to choose the better lens. bringing back the 70 to 200. It's good, but f2.8 is not as good. For the second set of images, I brought Sprite a further 4 long strides from the background. That makes it now about 24 foot. The distance between her and the camera remains the same at about 12 foot. Except for the 85mm lens, obviously I have to get closer for that lens, for both sets. It's the distance to the background I'm concentrating on. As you can see through the lens, that wasn't the most stable position to shoot from, but you kind of push the limits with the Z9 and you tend to rely on it. Let's start with the Z7200, nothing wrong with that image. Is the background more acceptable at this distance, f2.8? What do you reckon? There's a huge difference with the 85mm. So what's the 200mm going to be like? Well, pretty impressive as it turns out. Now all three, and the difference is quite obvious. Though somehow I managed to miss most of the distracting background with the 200, I think we can see enough to get the point. Cropping into the 85mm, not only is it as sharp as I'd expected, once again the depth of field separation really makes the eyes stand out. And the gradual softening away from them, oh, it looks really natural. Back to the 200, considering the age of this lens, I'm really impressed with the consistent results that it gives. And incidentally, it's the same age as the 85mm. Interesting, isn't it? Same year they were brought out. Though because of the girth of the 200 lens and its funny little foot, it's really tricky to handle. I was really worried about dropping it actually. On the flip side, one of the things I really like about the lens, I don't have to get into the face of the dog like I do with the 85mm. Now a lot of dogs don't like that, and why should they? And that's why I normally use the 300mm to give a distance. And talking of the 300, this is how it compares with the other lenses. The 200, the 85mm, and the Z70-200, which oddly was the least consistent lens of the group. Not what I was expecting, I can tell you. I was so impressed with the 200 f2 that if I hadn't just paid my tax bill, I'd have already bought a used VR2 version. I've seen them around for £2,000. Mind you, you can pick up its predecessor for about £1,300, and there's very little difference between them. Do you know, it's amazing how good some of the older lenses are. We as photographers are very good at looking forward for the latest lenses with desperate longing. Maybe, just maybe, we should look behind us occasionally. There's an awful lot of great old lenses that are still as good today. Thank you so much for joining me, and if you liked it, you know what to do, you like it, and if you really liked it, then do please subscribe, or let somebody else have a look at it and get them to subscribe. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and see you next time. Take care. Bye.